Hi guys, my name is Aryan. I'm the founder of Ketovation and K Nutri. We're on the K Nation Movement podcast. And today I have a very special guest with me, Patrick Vellner. Patrick Vellner is finishing his Doctor of Chiropractic at CMCC, and he's also the second fittest man on earth. He's been at the CrossFit Games 3 years in a row as an individual, and he's been on the podium all 3 years. So thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it. If you want to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got started with this crazy sport called CrossFit.
Yeah, so that pretty much sums it up pretty well. Right now I'm still finishing my schooling. I'm in my last year. I'll graduate May of 2019, and in sort of whatever free time that I have, I spend a lot of time at the gym training, and I've been competing at the CrossFit Games for the last few years, with finishing second in the last year, which was awesome. As far as getting started in it, I think a lot of people who compete in CrossFit have a strong sporting background, and I kind of had the same story. I was a gymnast, high-level gymnast for a long time, and lacrosse player, and when I moved away for university, I kind of stopped playing competitive sports, organized sports, and I had a lot of free time on my hands as a result of that. So I tried to put that energy into something else, and for a while I was just training kind of to stay in shape. I know it's good for you and everything like that. So I ended up just meeting some friends at the gym who were doing CrossFit, and they kind of got me into it slowly, convinced me to compete. And then it was a slippery slope from there, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. What led you to become a chiropractor? Where was that decision made?
I think I kind of decided to go for that in university when I was kind of most of the way through my degree. I studied in kinesiology. I did a honors in kinesiology at McGill University. And I think I just had, going through my life and as an athlete, I had a lot of therapists over the course of my career. And we had good family friends who were chiropractors, and I had a lot of treatment from chiropractors growing up, falling on my head a lot as a gymnast. And I just had good care through chiropractic, and I thought it was good. And it's sort of one of those pay it forward situations where you want to give other people that same experience that you had. And I wanted to work somewhere in healthcare and work with people. So I think it just fit pretty well. So I had a good opportunity to do that and took it.
Yeah, that's cool, because then you get to apply the areas that you're passionate about into people that are kind of going through the same things that you are.
Yeah, and I think you draw from your own experience as well, right? So I guess I've been fortunate enough to have been hurt a lot of different ways. So I hopefully can use some of that experience to help other people, and help them get back on their feet the same way that was done for me.
Yeah. So, people see you now, and you're obviously, an elite level athlete, and you've done really well for yourself at the CrossFit Games. But when you were first starting out, I'm sure things were a little bit different, as I'm sure many people might have seen. You have earlier videos up on YouTube of doing the CrossFit Open, and it's hard to believe that you were the same athlete. So what was that like for you starting out and not really getting the hang of things right away? What led you to kind of persist through getting better and putting that time and energy into building your weaknesses?
I think I was fortunate that I had a strong training background, so I did learn things pretty quickly. I think especially gymnastics is a pretty good base for movement in general. Understanding mechanics and movement, it makes it a lot easier to learn almost anything. And actually, I would kind of credit my gymnastics background a lot for being able to develop quickly, and not because I know a lot of people love gymnastics as a background because there's a lot of gymnastics movements in CrossFit, and it must be super nice to just be able to do that stuff without thinking. And yeah, it is. When the first time I jumped up on the rings, I could do 10 muscle ups in a row. It wasn't a problem. I could do handstand walk forever. It was easy. But a lot of the weightlifting and things like that I had never done before in my life. And when I started really kind of training, I probably couldn't really back squat 185 pounds, less than what I weigh now, and that takes a long time to develop. But one of the best things that gymnastics gives you is a good attitude about failure. I think you spend most of your day in training as a gymnast falling and missing and screwing up what you're trying to do, until hopefully eventually down the road you finally do it right, and then you have to try to remember that feeling and continue that. So you learn to be less discouraged by failure than maybe most people are. I know you see a lot of people get frustrated and quit stuff because they just they can't stand the thought of not being good at it, or at they can't stand that constant failure stimulus. But I think you really internalize the fact that failure is just like your first crack at trying something. Like it's an essential part of the learning process, and so it's not as discouraging. You kind of just, you're used to it. Like that's what happens when you learn something. And if you're not constantly failing in some place in your life, it's because you've stopped trying to grow. Like you've stopped trying to learn new things, and that's a bad sign. Like screwing things up is good. It means that you're stepping out of your comfort zone and you're trying to improve yourself in some way. So that's, I think, the biggest thing that helped me progress quickly, is that I had no problem with like being bad. Well, I wouldn't say I had no problem with it. I didn't like not being good at something, but I didn't find it discouraging. It didn't make me want to stop. It made me want to pursue it even more, to prove that like, hey, I know I can do this. Like I think I can get better at this. And then every time, like little by little, you just make the steps and the strides to improve. So yeah, obviously I started just like anybody else. Like it's easy to look way down the road and say like, wow, like this is super crazy. Like people think, you must have always been really good at whatever, but like, no, I was bad. Like I developed quickly because I worked hard at it. And I was used to training, like 25 hours a week. So I had that big gap that I was willing to invest time into. And I'm just competitive. Like I said, when I was not good at something, it didn't sit well with me. I would spend the time to try to improve, and be focused on what it took to try to improve, and make the right strides to like whatever it is. Look up a YouTube video, like try to talk to somebody else who's better at it than you, and try to get some tips, and just look for tools that are available to help you improve.
Right. And that's a key thing that you said. We talked about that probably in every single podcast we've had so far, is the ability to fail. I think is the only way that you can grow. Justin and I previously talked about, people we grew up with who were athletic and didn't really have to overcome any sort of failure getting to, the level they were at when they were younger. And so that led them to not really work hard at their craft. And most of those people that I knew growing up that were good at things, they weren't good as adults, because they just weren't able to look at failure in a positive way and kind of learn and grow from that. Now with school, most people are not doing an elite level of sport in school, let alone a professional school like, chiropractic school. So people talk about this term balance, and in my opinion, there's never really a complete balance. It's almost always shifted towards one side or the other, and it's not ever really ideal. But how do you find kind of that balance between, maintaining your social life, school, and getting into the gym and getting those hours of training that you need now that you're at this level? I
think the way you described it as shifting balance is good. I think that's accurate, and the way I look at things is, I think you have to sort of take everything that you have and determine what requires the most attention at what time. So when it comes to trying to balance my school with training, you have to look at your year as a whole and kind of periodize your lifestyle to fit what your needs are in different times of the year. So when I'm competing at the CrossFit Games, or in the main CrossFit Games season, was kind of like in the past was March through to August kind of thing. And so once that new year kind of hits, okay, I got to start focusing on improving my fitness level and spending more time training and being a bit more diligent in that space. So that starts to take up more time and space. It just does. And when it gets closer to the games, it takes up more and more space. So I need to be prepared for how is my school going to fit in with that. There's only a limited space. Like you have a finite amount of space. So where does school fit in there? Where does my social life fit in there? And traditionally, when the games finish and it's the summer, I have a lot of time. And in the last few years, we've had time off school in the summer. Now I'm working as an intern, so we work through the summer. But in the past, that last kind of all of August, I've got no CrossFit. Like that's all gone. So I can reinvest a lot of that free time back into like my family and friends and stuff that I've put on hold for a while. And then when school starts back up, I devote a lot of time to my education for that like September through to January time of the year. Try to work ahead on as many things as I can, build myself a buffer, I guess, in my grades, so that I've done everything I can so that come January, come March, when I need to start stealing some of those hours away from school to push into training, I can afford it. I've structured my year in a way that there's space for that. And okay, now that I need the extra time in the gym, where can I steal it from? Okay, like an hour here from like your buddies and an hour here from school, and you kind of can add that in. But you have to look at it as you have a finite amount of space in your life, and you try to jam as many things in as you can. And as things take up more space, like that space comes from somewhere else. So you do need to be able to balance it in a way that if you want to keep all those things, that keeps everything available. Like if you alienate all your family and friends because you're spending so much time in different areas, like don't expect that they're going to be there for you when you you need something, right? Like you need to have the time where, like at the end of competition season, I've got a lot of extra time, and you need to, like, I don't leave it empty. Like I refill it with all of that. So it just depends. You kind of have to have some foresight, and you have to have a plan. I think the biggest thing you need in your life is a plan. Like whether it's short term or long term, like you need to have an idea of where you're headed, because that's the only way, like that's the best way to maximize your output in different areas, and is just by being organized and having a little bit of a plan of where you want to be in a few months and how you're going to do that.
Right. And that's awesome. The ability to kind of prioritize depending on the time of year and kind of what your goals are at that time, because I don't think a schedule, especially yours, will ever look the same, where it's like, oh, school from 8 to 2 and then train from this to this and then spend this time with that time. So I think that's awesome, the ability to kind of restructure your life based on what your current goals are. With school, I mean, it's not easy. I've gone through the undergrad course and grad school, and I know how much of a toll it can take, not even physically, but on your brain. If you finish a day of studying, it's almost impossible to get up and kind of go and do something physical. And I've seen it. I've seen you come into the gym after like a long day of school, and it's like you don't really want to get the ball rolling. But from what I've seen, you always manage to get in here and get exactly what you need done. Like your programming is A, B, C, D down to H, and you don't leave till you get it all done. So on those days where your body's begging you to just stay home and lay on the couch and watch some TV, how do you restructure your mentality to say, okay, this is what I need to do, and this is how I'm going to do it?
I think that there's kind of a delicate balance in that, where there probably are occasions where you need to listen to your body a little bit, and if you're really run down, what's the cost benefit? Is it really worth it? Are you going to get in and put work in that's worthwhile, or is it long term going to be maybe detrimental if you go do that? And maybe it's like whatever you're supposed to be doing, you dial back the weights a little bit, and you just do some exercise to refresh your brain. Like there's a lot of research around about the mental health benefits of exercise, right? Like if you just go for a walk for 20 minutes, like you'll feel a little bit rejuvenated after long days of work or school. So I think partly for me that the gym is such a different stimulus than school or work, that it can have a little bit of a rejuvenating effect. So when you are working super hard at school and you feel tired, like the hardest thing to do is to get yourself to the gym. And then once you're there and you kind of get rolling, like things are a little bit easier. But yeah, like I had a good one there. I lost it. But yeah, I think that you do need to, at the same time, depending on what your goals are, like it might be super important that you put hours in when you feel that way. Like for me, I need to, like that's where you win the CrossFit Games, is on days like that. Like you don't win it on a day where you really want to be there. Yeah. Like it's hard. Like some days it's really hard, and some days you are run down, and that might be how you feel in a competition or something like that. So depending on what your goals are, if you're just training for your health, maybe it's more important to listen to yourself a little bit, dial things back, like go cruise, sweat a little bit just to rejuvenate yourself. But yeah, for me, like I know what I'm training for, and like on days like that, sometimes that's what it takes. Yeah. And like you show up and you really, really don't want to be there, but like who knows how you're going to feel on Saturday, Sunday at the games, right? And that's where you win it. Like those are the days that are arguably more worth it, when you manage to like find another gear and be like, hey, we got to do this and figure it out. So there is value in that. I think it's just important in identifying what your actual goals are. I think like for me, there's a little bit of, like I said, I can easily visualize why I'm doing it, and I have the stubbornness to do it. But if that's not your goal, like you don't need to be beating the crap out of yourself on an average day that you're already run down and you're already tired. Like just go in and do something, and you'll feel just as good. And then I find I'm more effective. You know, like if I study for a bunch of hours and I get run down, like I feel like groggy, you know, you read the same thing 3, 4, 5 times and you still don't get it. I'll come to the gym and work out for a couple hours, and then I feel like I can get back to my original task with higher efficiency, having just done something else for a period of time. I think it doesn't need to be training or exercise, but that just happens to be what I do as my side hobby kind of. But if you just move yourself into another area and do something else for a little while to refresh your brain, it's nice. You'll come back and you'll feel better and you'll feel more efficient in whatever you're doing.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, I remember, all my days of studying, the one thing I looked forward to in the afternoons was being able to get up from my chair and get in a gym and move around. And for me, that was not just the physical aspect of, getting blood flow to the brain and to the body, but to really disconnect from whatever I was doing there. So, the gym might not necessarily have been easy at the time, but it was different. It was disconnecting from studying, from reality, from whatever problems that I had going on at the time. And I don't really think about anything in the gym. And I'm sure you're the same way. You get to just disconnect and do something that you like, whether it's, hard or not, or if you're feeling like doing it that day or not. I think whenever you leave, it's always on a positive note. It's like you feel accomplished. You did whatever you needed to do for the day. And now you get to get back to studying or working or whatever it is. And you're like on a fresh note.
For sure. And I mean, it depends how you kind of do your training. For me, I have a coach that does all of that planning for me, and like we'll build a plan, but she builds all the training. I just have to show up, read the sheet, and execute. So there's very little thinking involved in the training, like in the actual training. Once I show up in the gym, all the thinking's done beforehand, right? So there's something nice about that. Like you said, I can cruise control it and kind of go autopilot and just do some work for a couple hours. And then, you feel definitely accomplished at the end and like you've done something good. There's something super validating about having a good training session. And then, you can move on to the next step, like check that box and feel good and accomplished about it and then move on.
Sweet. What role do you think at this point, your sleep and nutrition and, staying hydrated, like those small things, what kind of role do you think that plays now at this level?
I think it's an important ingredient. I know a lot of people, this is a dangerous one. A lot of people say that that's foundational, right? Like it's fundamental, your nutrition, your sleep. And I think from a health perspective, that's true. If you're trying to, like say in my world of competing and training, if you think you're going to win a competition with your nutrition, you're wrong. Yeah. I think that first and foremost, your training needs to be smart. It needs to be hard. And then your extra like 1 to 5% of your performance is going to come from things like that, by recovering better, by eating better, like feeling better. For the average person, I would say it's probably the opposite, where you probably stand to gain a lot more by, if all you're doing is that 1 hour class or whatever, getting your group fitness in, you stand to benefit a lot by just taking care of how do I get more restful sleep, like buying blackout curtains and having having better sleep hygiene, like just planning your sleep, not watching screens in bed, and eating better, eating at the right times. I think that stuff's super, super important and will help people have a general better well-being and health. But from my perspective, I actually have probably, of all the top end athletes that I know, I have the worst, probably sleep and things like that. My nutrition is good because I have someone else that manages that for me, and I just have to follow instructions. But in general, I only really dial that in for specific times of the year, and say like this time of year, I give myself a little more freedom. And mostly that's just for my own mental health and sanity, so that I feel like I have some freedom and it's fine. And you build good habits. Like I still will generally eat what I was normally eating in competition just because I'm used to it. But I give myself a break a little more often than I would in peak season. Sleep for me is like the hardest one, just because I'm busy and I have a lot of stuff on my plate. So it will often happen that I'll go stretches at a time where I'm sleeping like maybe 6 hours a night for weeks or months, where it's just like, that's just how it is. I might get 6.5 hours and I'm happy about it. And then just things need to get done. Like I still need to train, I still need to work, I still need to go to school, and it just is what it is. Like I'm trying to pack a lot of things into a day, and I'm not super willing to give a lot of things up on any of the ends. Like I won't give up one of those hours at the gym. I won't give up, like I can't give up school or work or whatever. So there's very few places that you can pick up those hours, and like sleep is just one of them. So sometimes it costs me a couple hours of sleep, and that's fine. Maybe like once every couple weeks I'll sleep in pretty big on the weekend and try to bank some hours. But I think I could stand to improve a lot on that, and that's something I'm planning on doing this year a little bit. Is just investigating how I can, even if it means I'm only still sleeping 6.5 hours of sleep, how do I make those sleep hours really good? Like very restful sleep, uninterrupted, no tossing and turning, like no restlessness. So I'm kind of looking into some of that, better sleep hygiene, things like that. So yeah, I think it's super important for the average population, like general population. I think benefits a lot from those sort of things. And I think a lot of them are pretty easy to do. It's mostly habit forming that's the tough part. And then once you're used to it, it's no problem. It's not different. And it just, nowadays with all the screens and things like that, like people have a hard time turning things off, shutting themselves down for bed. Like people just don't, like a lot of people don't cook for themselves very often. So I think it's just getting used to that, getting in the habit. Like meal prepping is not hard. Like going to bed without sitting on your computer in your bed, it's not that hard to do. You just have to get used to it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it kind of goes back to that idea of balance, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Like you said, there's only enough hours that you can allocate to certain things. And
one of the biggest things that I usually tell people is, when like I get asked by a lot of people about how do you fit with your school and your training and everything, and like if something matters enough to you, you will make it work. Like you will find the time, you'll find the hour. Like if you care enough and it matters enough and you want something bad enough, like you'll figure it out. Like you will find the time. You make time for things that matter to you at the end of the day. So you just have to weigh that out. Like what matters more to you in that day? Like, does it matter more to you to get your 10 hours of sleep, or can you sacrifice a couple hours of sleep and do whatever? Like if you want to progress more in your training or in your schoolwork or whatever, so you make time for things that matter to you. And so you just have to make those decisions and really internalize that and say like, okay, like, yes, I want this, and here's what I'm willing to do to attain those goals.
That's really important. And you also mentioned quality. So I think the same thing applies to quality of sleep and quality of exercise. Like you could sleep 8 to 9 hours, with your mind running and you being on your laptop right before you go to bed, and you probably won't wake up feeling well rested. Or you could go to the gym for 5 hours and just stand around and not do that much, and you probably won't get that much out of it. But getting that quality sleep and kind of maximizing that, I think, is really key. Like I started using, there's an app called Headspace. 10 minutes before bed, throw on your headphones. Kind of ironic that's with a phone, but you just listen, it kind of talks you through it, and it really just turns off your brain. And you don't realize how many things you're thinking about from the day and then the day after that you got to get done before you go to bed. It's always a time where you're by yourself and your brain just has its chance to kind of roam free. And if you go to bed with all those things running, there's a really good chance that you won't shut off your brain. It's a good chance that you'll sleep poorly. Your brain will be running the whole time. And I felt the difference, if I get 7 hours of sleep where I feel good and my body's completely relaxed when I go to bed, I feel way better in the morning than I do after 8 hours of sleep, let's say. So I'm glad you said that.
And there's little things and there's a lot of literature out there about ways that you can improve on stuff like that. Like I know one of the things you said, when your mind's racing, people always think about, you get on these tangents and then you remember things in the day that like, oh, I have to remember to do this tomorrow, or this or this or this. And if you just before bed, if you have some of that stuff, like write it down. Like again, like your phones, like everyone's smartphones now are such a good tool. Like I would be useless without my phone. Like frankly, I use my calendar on my phone to manage so much, and I set alarms and reminders for every little thing. So if I think about something in a day and I'm currently not able to do it, I'll just be like, well, I'll put it in my phone reminder for like whatever, 2-3 hours from now of like this thing. And I won't forget it because it'll go off. It'll buzz and I'll be like, oh, right, this thing. And if I can do it right now, I will. If you can get something off your plate now, do it. And then I'll just like, I check that box and it's good. But if you have some of that stuff and you write it down before bed, you're not worried about forgetting it. You're not worried about like, oh man, like am I going to remember this tomorrow? I have like, what all do I have to do? Like da 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 da. You just, all that stuff is already down. Like it's solid and it's tangible and it's down somewhere. So you've effectively like, you've managed it. You've delegated it to like whatever, your calendar or your phone or whatever. And like that will serve as your assistant to remind you, and then you can just do it when it's time and you don't have to worry about it anymore. You can rest easy. So little things like that like are easy mini stress relievers that I think I know for a long time I just tried to keep too many things in my head at once and I always forget things because of it. And so little things like that, like calendaring or keeping a small agenda, like it's silly and it's probably something that people did in like elementary school, you know, like write on your agenda, everything. And then we stopped doing it. And like when you're just busy, like we have a lot of things that we pack into our lives and it's so easy to forget things. So those sort of little tools will help you just remember and stay way more efficient. And like I said, as soon as it goes off, just do it and then check the box. And then you'll feel good for having done it and check the box and you get that kind of high of productivity and then you can move on.
Yeah, and it feels good. And you're right. Like we have a lot of power just like in our smartphone, but also like I have an agenda.
But yeah, we use it for like whatever, right?
Right. And it's funny, like, when I got my agenda last year, it was actually last summer. I was, 26 years old, and I was like, the last time I used an agenda, I remember checking off my homework list, in like elementary school, and it's funny, I used to forge my mom's signature at the bottom to show that I got all my homework done, right? I remember I got caught one time. It was kind of funny, but I never realized how powerful of a tool that was because I could, that feeling of, checking things off and then having your next day kind of pre-planned at least, those like 5 to 10 key essential things that you got to absolutely get done. And then knowing, that's all organized, that's what kind of gives you that relief in your, reduces that anxiety in your head. It's like, well, that's written down, and when tomorrow comes, then I'll deal with that and I'll check it off.
And that's what like the calendars and like your phone or whatever, like that have alerts, like those sort of things are awesome. Like if you can set a calendar in your laptop that will alert you when you need to do things, it makes it so much easier, right? Like you never miss anything anymore. Like I don't even have to check my agenda. Like it's gonna pop up on my phone or my watch or whatever and say like, hey, you got to do this. And like right on, and you just do it. And it, like I said, if you can't do it at that moment, you just like reschedule the reminder to later when you think you might be free. And then that way, when it pops up, you can do it, and then you can eliminate that task off your to-do list. And I know, like I personally, when I check boxes off a to-do list, like I feel great. And that productivity kind of brings more productivity. Like you get rolling and you feel like, okay, man, like this is great. Like and then once you do 2 things, then 3 things, and you're like, man, I'm riding high here. And then you feel good and you're more ready to tackle the next thing. Whereas if you let things pile up, it seems daunting and you don't know where to start, right? So sometimes like small, easy, redundant tasks are like the best way to get yourself moving, where you like take the garbage out and you're like, nice, sweet, like pat yourself on the back, then you like wash a couple of dishes and you're like, here we go. And then all of a sudden like you're 2 assignments into your homework or whatever, and you're just like that. Once that ball gets rolling, it's easier to tackle the next obstacle. Whereas if you walk around and you're like, man, I have these 10 things to do, like, oof, I guess it's gonna be a big day. But if you just, like I said, you have a reminder here and there, so you don't see everything all at once. You see them like one at a time. It's like, cool, one small thing at a time. And then you can sort of tackle the smallest things first to just give yourself that momentum. And then you can really lean into the harder stuff afterwards, and it doesn't feel so hard.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I got to ask you about competition because, I did some competing when I was younger and I took a lot of time off that, and I didn't really start competing until CrossFit. And I did one of my first competitions was in Miami for Wadapalooza a couple of years ago. And I remember I was nervous, and I felt like my performance was affected the whole week, and I didn't feel like myself. And I didn't realize, even I was doing an intermediate division, but I put so much pressure on myself to do well, and I don't know why. I don't know if it was because I hadn't competed in a while, but when you go into competitions especially like the first one that you did, what was your mindset like, and how did you kind of shift it? Because I know that you perform under pressure, judging by, what you've told me in the past.
Yeah. So here's a note on what you're saying is there's a couple reasons probably. One being that you invest a lot of time into your training, and for the other thing is you were competing on a team, right? Yeah. Like, so you want to perform well because you've invested a lot of time and effort into this, and it is a reflection of your effort. Mm-hmm. Like, frankly, it is. Yeah. Whether or not the outcome is, but your performance and your execution and things is a reflection of kind of the hours you've put in. And so if you didn't care about that, then that's bad. Yeah. Like, you should care. And and your nervousness just reflects the fact that you care. You're invested in what you're doing, which is great. Everybody should be nervous for anything that you're, whatever. If you're making a big oral presentation, or you know what I mean, like you're going to defend your PhD, like you should feel a little bit nervous because you've put a lot of time into that. Yeah. Like, hell yeah, you should be nervous. Yeah. If you're not, I'd be really, really worried. Yeah. So the fact that you're nervous is great. And I mean, working on a team, you have two other people who are also relying on your performance, right? So I think in a team situation, there's a little bit of added pressure on top of that because you want to perform not only to meet your own expectations, but to meet the expectations of your teammates. And 99% of the time, their expectations for you aren't as high as what you think they are. So you kind of project this expectation onto yourself. And so it's like, team is hard. Like, it makes you really nervous. For me, I think I've benefited from experience, obviously, like even in competing in gymnastics where things are, it's so performance on demand. Like, you practice these routines 1,000 times and then you have to compete it and you get one chance, and if you fall, like, you fall. And I have to move on to the next event and still try to perform my best in that event and the next one and the next one, regardless of what happens in each one independently. So you do get used to that kind of pressure scenario. Like, there's almost no higher pressure situation like that, or like Olympic weightlifting where, you're like, it's like, okay, go. And like the whole place is quiet and it's just you, and literally everybody in the room is watching you. Yeah. It's like, those are high pressure scenarios, and you kind of just have to get used to like how that feels. And it always feels weird. Like, I think still, I thought about it a couple times this year at the games and at the regionals even, like when you're on that competition floor and it's like a big wide competition floor, and it's so different from when you're training in a gym. You feel kind of weird. Like, it's almost like an out of body kind of experience. Yeah. And it's like, that's where I think your training hours kind of take control, and you need to perform on a certain degree of muscle memory. And it's sometimes very challenging to relax. And I think the more you compete, the better you get at it. But still, always for the first few events, or like the first time we compete in the Coliseum or something every year, you walk on those like rubber mats, and it's just like, it's such a different environment that you feel weird. Yeah. So I think that's not an uncommon thing. But you just like, you kind of have to just ride that wave a little bit and be confident and comfortable enough in the fact that you've prepared well, and you're like, it's going to be what it's going to be. Like, you just need to put your best foot forward and try to do whatever you can do, and leave it on the floor. Like, as cliche as all that is, it's like, you've already kind of done all of the training at those points. Your hardest work is kind of done, and now you just need to, it's your opportunity to perform and show what your hard work has brought. So you just sort of have to look at it as like, it's the same when you like write an exam or something like that. Like, when people get nervous about exams, it's like, dude, you spent 20 hours studying this material. Like, now you get to show off. It's like, show off how fucking smart you are. Yeah. It's like, that's at the end of the day, like, that's what it is. Like, blow their minds. Yeah. Do it. Yeah. Like, and that's how you kind of have to look at it, is like, okay, like you've spent so much time and energy investing into whatever it is that you're doing. And then those performance scenarios, like I said, like defending a thesis, like writing an exam, competing in an event, like that's your performance piece. And that's kind of your opportunity to just like reflect and show what your hard work has brought. Right. And I think that if you can think of it that way, it can kind of help relax you. You take a little bit more pressure off. But we always, like I said, we project expectations. Like over the years, my first competition, I probably was like I'm a little nervous because I'd never done it, but I had no expectations. I was like, cool, like whatever it is what it's going to be. But now when I compete, there is, like it or not, like there is higher expectations for me. And I think that to a certain degree you do feel that. But I always try to remember that, like, Probably at the end of the day, my personal expectations of myself are higher than any expectations that anybody else might have. So you kind of, you have to be fine with that. It's like people are going to be okay. Like maybe they expect you to like win this event or do a little bit better, but like at the end of the day, it's like, sorry, like I also wanted to win that event. Like, yeah, like it doesn't matter. Like their expectation doesn't really matter that much. So it's more about meeting your own expectations and how you set your goals kind of will be a bigger player in that sort of scenario.
Mm-hmm. And kind of like the last thing that I want to touch on is, the past 3 years at the CrossFit Games, you didn't have the most ideal start to the weekend. Going all the way back to even that regionals where you tore your bicep in a competition and the director of the games was kind of like, well, maybe good luck next year. How do you use those things to kind of like fire you up and put that chip on your own shoulder to come crawling back to the top, which you've done successfully many times?
Yeah, I need to stop doing that. But I think that's a competitor's mindset. Like I don't know. There's not, those are like, I think some of the maybe intangibles that people talk about when you like competitors who are like, they have it, like I don't know. I think that it is kind of that chip on your shoulder kind of thing. Like you want to prove to a certain degree that like, yeah, you've earned your spot, you belong there, you have earned everything that you've been given. So for some scenarios, like, yeah, like, I don't know. I obviously you generate momentum throughout the season, and I've had seasons that were really good going into the games, and then to start off on such a sour note is frustrating. But you need to remember that, like, yeah, the whole, like, I'm still the same athlete I was just before that event. Like, it's fine. And you have to try to continue to move forward. And I think that I'm just, like, I'm very stubborn, and I'm like, I have that chip, and I'm like defiant to the degree that like I will make it work. Like I will find a way to make it work. And so I've been able to do that successfully in the last few years. Sometimes with more difficulty than I maybe needed, but I pride myself on that a little bit, that I'm not easily discouraged. And I think that like when things like that happen, like I'll figure it out. And like even this year, honestly, it was funny. Like after the first event, and I did very poorly, crashed the bike. I remember finishing the event and being done and just thinking like, well, like here we go again. Like it's like at least you know that you can do it. Yeah. And it was like there was some comfort in that, where I was like, it's fine. Like you've done this before, like no big deal. Yeah. So it's just like, just do it. Like now you have to work extra hard. Yeah. And like it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a cool comeback story though. And you just have to like be confident in the fact that, like I earned my spot there, and I did so quite commandingly. And it's like, I know that I'm one of the better athletes in the field, and like I just have to show it now. But no one's going to get out of your way. Like you've got to tear it out of someone's hands in order to get those podium spots and things like that. So like you just have to want it bad enough to take it from someone else. And that's kind of like how it is. So yeah, it's not the funnest thing to claw back. Like hopefully I can stop doing that, but we'll see. If not, like I'm happy to be identified as an athlete who will always like get back up and figure it out and right the ship and make it work. Like that's, I think, a pretty cool legacy to have, I guess. Is the fact that like no matter what happens, like I'm still gonna be there and I'm still gonna keep coming, and it's kind of cool. But
it is cool, and you have a
cool. It's cool afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, once the weekend's done. But you got a whole nation supporting you, and beyond that, I mean, you have people all over the world that are really supporting you, and I've kind of fall in love with the idea of a comeback story. Like no matter what happens, you're able to claw your way back to the top, which is, people at the beginning think that must be impossible to do. So it's really cool. And kind of like that last thing would be, our motto has always been to stay focused and be consistent. I mean, that's something that has rung in my head for as long as I can remember. Even thinking back to university, trying to get into certain schools and trying to get better at sports. It's always been, well, if you want to get successful at anything, you have to stay focused on it for a long period of time and be consistent with it no matter what. So if you had to give kind of, a piece of advice to someone who is either new to CrossFit or is at that level where they're trying to get to regionals or the games, but they're just trying to get it, healthy and exercising. What piece of advice would you have for them to kind of stay with it?
I think your consistency point is super important. It's easy to get discouraged when you don't see results quickly or things like that, but like nothing happens quick. And nowadays, I think that we kind of live in a world of instant gratification where people want things to happen quickly, and they want to see results fast. And that's just not how it works. Like I think that even to our point before about training on days when you don't feel like it, like that consistent effort extrapolated across 2-3 years is what makes a difference. Yeah. Like it's so easy to do things when you feel like it, but it's the days when you really don't feel like it and the days when it's hard and then you still put that consistent effort in. Like that's what makes a difference, is that consistent effort across so many days, like so many years. So yeah, it's hard. And you're right. Like you keep that focus on your goal and try to just always move forward. Like try not to backslide too much, and just keep your eyes forward and keep taking small steps, because consistency over time is what develops results. Like there's no doubt about that. I think it'd be hard to argue otherwise. So I think to me that's kind of the most important thing. And I think like you said, it's easy to see the highlights and the whatever, but like what people don't see is that consistent effort over a long time. And I mean, say like in my world of training, like you guys see that every day when I'm here, like, and like the rest of the population tunes in for 1 week a year and goes like, oh man, that was awesome. Yeah. Like, and you made it look so easy. It's like, yeah, like I'll tell you something, it wasn't super easy. Like it's not easy on Sunday morning to get to the gym and work out by yourself. But if those are your goals, like that's what it takes. So yeah, I think consistency, you've nailed it a little bit on that. That's got to be the priority and like the number one thing.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, thank you for joining the podcast. This was awesome getting to sit down with you. We talk around the gym a lot, but it was just nice to kind of sit down and do this. If you want to just let everyone know if they want to find you on social, if they want to connect with you somehow, where can they find you on like Instagram?
Yeah, so best one's probably my Instagram, and it's just at @Vellner. Pretty simple.
Sweet. All right. Well, look forward to the upcoming season. I'm sure you'll do great. We got a lot of ton of people supporting you here. And again, if you guys want to find us, we're the K Nation Movement on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube as well. And you can look forward to our launch with K Nutri coming up at K Nutri on Instagram and Facebook, and www.knutri.com. So thanks, Pat.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Sweet.